3, 2, 1.
Very glad to be in Los Angeles right now as an art maker, as an artist. Since you're still in the studio.
Questions? Okay. So formal.
Oh, you're so cheerful. I know. I don't know if I can perform in such a formal. Let's see.
Can you tell me, where did this current body of work begin?
Oh my goodness. I think it began about 10 years ago, actually. Longer? Honestly, I would say the starting point was Bush to Iraq. It became the war on terror.
Yeah.
When I'm kind of a news junkie, so when the war on terror just became, there was this period of time where, I don't know if you guys had this, but we had a terror alert system here.
Yeah.
We're on orange. Oh, it's a yellow alert. You were supposed to know this color-coded terror alert and how much danger you were in on any given day. And so there was just this sort of, media assault on your nervous system, And it just began creeping into my work as this, or into my being as this sort of anxiety that was kind of free floating, because if you stopped and thought about it, you couldn't be in a safe, here in LA, we were pretty far from the action, and I began thinking about that, about how kind of the psychology of that we're all running around as if we're in a war zone. And thinking about the effect of media on our psychology, on our quality of life, and I also began thinking about how one addresses those kinds of anxieties. When it's not that they're not real, but they're not real in the sense of in my case anyway, being a likely threat to my own personal safety, but my brain and my body were beginning to act as if they were real threats. And so I decided to look at that, like to actually make that an area of research. I don't know if you can get above this, or... Okay, well anyway, I talked to you a little bit about where when language first started showing up in my work.
Yeah.
This was when I was working on kind of a survivalist ideas, and I decided to I went onto survivalist websites, and I was just inundated with the amount of supplies, with all the different things one could buy to be ready for the big disaster. And so I decided to make a survival manual, and it started out where I was. This was one of them. The first one I made, basically, I listed without looking everything I could imagine one would need in a disaster.
Yeah.
From there, I decided to try to cross-reference. This is a cross-reference of disasters to supplies, where you can be ready if you get these things for biological warfare and drought and pandemic flu and volcanic eruption and flood and whatnot. It's absurd, but it's also incredibly sort of seductive. When you get into it, you can't really stop. Thank you. This is my collection, some of my collection of, out where I go in the desert, I come across, like there was this estate sale. It makes it sound like an estate. Somebody's, little place out in the middle of the desert, some old guy died. And so they had a big garage sale of his stuff. And there was just the most awesome collection of stuff. This is a whole bag filled with, all it said on the bag was first aid atom bomb. This stuff is just gold to me.
Wow, yeah.
And I usually ends up in my installations. And I started a project, I called it the Survival Project, that really initially had to do with imagining worst case scenarios. And I did a whole body of work. That's how I got into the Morse code, how you would communicate if all the systems shut down. And I went through getting very involved, at least in research, with the whole prepper movement, the people who actually live their whole lives as if, the world's about to come to an end. And I just went pretty deep into it in my work. And I found it just fascinating. And oddly enough, it was almost like going through stages of grief, that as I did this work, I would I went through a whole series of, prepping for survival. And then I went through a whole series of, as if, what would you say? What would you say if you were cut off from society and knew your death was imminent? That language, how is language affected? And in that case, I did that skywriting series, and I did the Morse code series, and what I realized is how little there would be to say. Like when you're really under threat, you kind of lose your powers of eloquence, Mom, and then I'm still in the next stage, which for me is kind of the aftermath, which is let's imagining the worst of the worst were to happen, whatever that is. What then? What And so we see the worst of the worst every day on the news. And one recurring image you see. Well, this work came out of. I always work from news, sort of documentary photography. So there are these images that are almost iconic. They become so familiar, and it'll be like an image from a particular event, a particular bombing, a particular school shooting, or whatever. And so just prior to this particular body of work, I had been making paintings based on numerous of these familiar images, from the tsunami in the Philippines, from some hurricanes in the Midwest, and I at some point stumbled on the Oklahoma City building that was bombed. I was going to ask what you guys think of LA, but I won't.
I
Actually,
love it.
you do?
Great
comments.
Today's extras. Yeah.
You like it?
Yeah.
It's a very strange place. It's a very linear place. Hey everybody, I'm Claudia. Thanks for coming. Yeah, how exciting. I think I thought there'd be about 6 of you. I'm overwhelmed. So, anyway, just to tell you a little bit about my work, I'm a bit of a worst case scenario kind of girl. Well, it's about a year and a half ago. I've been doing images, and on the other side, on a purely formal side, what I was finding is that I was pushing against abstraction. I was dealing with images. I was dealing with documentary footage and documentary photography, and that was those are my source images. And often I was looking at images that were so chaotic that the only thing keeping them from becoming total abstractions were horizon line. And I noticed in my work, in my paintings in particular, that you could do anything, but you stick a horizon line in there and you have a picture. And so I decided I wanted to see what happened if I removed the horizon line. Like, would I lose, would anything be left of that kind of chaos of these images? And so I went looking for a photograph that didn't have a horizon line, like that wasn't that wasn't what grounded the image in some kind of reality. And yes, yeah, right. You got it. Yeah, so it occurred to me, it wasn't even, I'd seen the image so many times in my life, but I remembered the first terrorist attack in American terrorists that I remember being a really big deal in my life was when this, lone kook bombed a federal building in Oklahoma City. And the image, in reality, I've never been there. In reality, it was not a large building. It was pretty nondescript. It was just a government nondescript building. But it became very, very, in my brain, and I think in the mind of most of the public, it became like a searing image. And the curve of that building and the fact that the entire face of the building had come off. And it was instantly recognizable. And I decided to, at that time, I was just going to do one painting of that building. And I believe this was it. It was this first one. And I didn't want it to go into pure abstraction, so I made sure to have certain architectural elements in it. So you would, if you didn't know what the building was, you would still somehow recognize it as some kind of a structure. And in that case, I felt like, it didn't push far enough. It wasn't abstract enough. It was too much a representation of that building. And I was going for something else. And I think what I was going for, I was beginning to really question these images in the first place. Like, realizing that I'm painting this image and that it has a completely different shape and size in my mind than it really does in real life. Realizing that I'm painting this image that was a small building, it was a big deal, but that at this very same time, there are entire countries that if buildings are standing at all, they all have their faces off, and that every single one of those cubbies you look at was someone's life, And I just began to think a lot about the gap between the image and our interpretation of it, or the image and what we think it represents and what it really represents, or what it really represented to the people in that building. And so I began to question the validity of the information we get, of the images that we're fed, that get streamed in, the ones that we lock onto because they're especially dramatic or poignant or something. And I felt as if I wanted to drill down into that image somehow.
What do you usually do while you're doing it?
You know, I'm not a big, I listen to the radio all the time when I'm not working, but I don't really tend to do it when I am working.
Yeah.
It's completely mindless. I can talk on the phone, but usually what I do is, this has to dry in between layers before I sand it. So usually what I will do is do one pass, go and work on a drawing, come back and sand it, do another pass. You know, I do like to have something else going on, because otherwise it's mind-numbing. I mean, it's mind-numbing no matter what. But I like it. It's completely task-oriented. It's very, very different than when you're actually working on a painting. The Morse code was a little like this. Morse code took so much planning out. It was, you know, you have to figure out, plan the whole thing, the layers, where it's going to go, how many letters, how it fits, all that. So that was a little bit like this process, just very, very task-oriented, not at all intuitive. This particular body of work is, to me, it's almost more painterly. You know, there's different types of decisions being made. Like I said to you, that like even these ones that are basically duplicates of others, I'm still having to make decisions about each unique piece.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like this one, I don't know if it's done, even though it would be done according to the other piece that it's taken from.
Yeah.
But I think I could make it a better painting on its own.
Why do you think that you don't listen to the? Because I gather when you listen to the radio, you probably listen to music, yeah.
I really don't. I used to be a musician. I am a musician, and they've actually done studies about this. I never understood why. We found that people who study music from a young age process music in the language part of the brain. So when I'm listening to music, it's like someone's talking in my ear. It's very, very distracting. But I can listen to talking heads on the radio, no problem. So in my car, I'll listen to music, but at work, I never do. And then when other people do, I find it really distracting. And one of the most painful periods, and I go through it every time I have a show for sure. I've gotten so that I plan for the time after. Like I even try to make, I try to know where I'm going next and just be ready. So I can go back into the studio the next day. It never happens. I've got this dead period.
Yeah.
And it is a period of gestation, and I know that, and knowing it doesn't make it any less painful. It always feels like you'll never have an idea again, and that you've just gone blank.
Yeah, and then you're just wasting time.
And then you're just wasting time. I have a little cabin out in the desert. Love it out there.
Yeah.
And when we got it, it was a little homesteader cabin that out by Joshua Tree. I don't know if you've been out there.
Yeah.
But people used to be able to, they had to have something like 500 square feet to plop down on land to call it their own. And so these sort of old cabins are all over the place. And you can pick them up pretty cheap. So we picked one out. And I was obsessed with getting a workspace out there. Like building something that we could work, right, or at least a shelter thinking that this would be so great to go off to the desert and work. And I can't work out there to save my life.
Right.
I think it's become a gestation place. It's like
Yeah.
I go out there and it's just, there's so little stimulus.
Yeah.
It's just, sky, that's what the desert's like. And I just go, it's great. It's become a really generative place. Like, it's not a place where I work.
Yeah.
It's a place where I go really blank.
Yeah.
And I think that's when that actually is when your brain is chugging along without you realizing it. One of the things I found interesting about that building is that it seemed in many ways, at least in this country, in my life, to be the first, my first awareness of, terrorism close hand. That some kid can mix fertilizer in his backyard and create, crazy destruction. And so I that was just one more image that I was gonna use, and I got stuck there. Something about that image that I haven't entirely figured out what it is yet. Some of it is formal issues I got into while I was doing this work that kept me interested. Formal issues having to do with the grid, the abstraction of this image. But part of what I found interesting is that as I worked on this image, which initially people recognized because it was so familiar to people who were alive at that time anyway, is that we now see that same image, a building with the front blown off, really often. We see it in New York after 9/11. We see it in Palestine, in Syria. And I've seen this image, which is, basically the grid of apartment buildings that don't have a face on them. And so it became kind of a, I guess, a meaningful image to me. And it began, I think it's kind of morphed away from holding closely to that original image I worked from. And although the first one or two paintings I made of this building, I worked from that photograph, I then began to work from the painting or drawing I had made for the next one. And as I did that, I began to get further and further away from the original image. Part of that was because I was interested in abstraction and interested in how abstract can you go before tipping over, into kind of a pure abstraction where you've completely lost image entirely. And I've been doing a kind of push-pull with that. We're starting to get pretty far away from the original subject matter. Although in my head, I'm still right there with that broken building. And trying to find the elements, what elements it needs to succeed as a picture, but also what are the elements in this image? How much information do you need for it to tell you what you need to know? Is the chaos and the pure abstraction enough? Does it have to, do you have to know that it's a building? Do you have to know that it's a specific building? So, well, really what happened, I began doing this charcoal work, and that happened because I was invited to be in a drawing show and she only wanted work made of, with pencil or charcoal. And I thought, oh, okay, well, oh, thank you so much. Did you turn it off?
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's not wiggling.
So I did it. I thought, well, I've been dealing with this image for so long now. I could draw this image in my sleep. I'm going to do a charcoal drawing or a pencil drawing. I did it in pencil, and it was very tight and very rendered. And I thought, well, that's not what I'm after. So that was like not photographic, but pencil has a way of, for me anyway, of you get very nitpicky and so I decided to loosen up a lot and put away the image and do it with charcoal. And that got exciting to me. There's something about the speed at which you work with charcoal, it's just the way it moves on the page. There's something about the kind of the energy that to me sort of almost kind of works with the subject matter. And so I just started drawing this building over and over and over again, little charcoal drawings on paper. And I thought, now I really like these. I think I like them better than the paintings. How would I make this a painting? Like how would I, and I decided, I'm just gonna start doing this on canvases, like blow them up and see what happens. But I'm finding the further away, I'm about 10 years out of school, and the further away I am from school, which is, very history and theory based and all of that, very, very intellectual environment, the more I think this is common, the more I find myself embracing the part of working that I don't understand, like not even having to understand it so much,
Yeah.
Okay, that's where I want to do it.
So when did you start this?
When did we start this?
You just started telling me about it yesterday.
Did we start this yesterday?
Yeah.
Yesterday. I did little ones. I've been doing the little ones for a few days as soon as you left town.
Yesterday was when we started buying all the rope and everything.
Well, this is interesting. We could. Do you want how high up? Kind of up to the top knot, I would say. Okay, well, I'll take this. And you? So you need to be high enough to get the big ones at the bottom, so you get a little bit of that foreshortening.
Very large.
It did end up really big.
Didn't seem that big when it was on
I know. Okay. This is my idea. The rafters in that building
Yeah.
where the show's going to be? So the idea is that it would be hung on the rafters, and it would be hung out from the wall just enough and lit, just enough to separate it from its shadow. Because I think the shadow is going to speak to the drawing and the drawings and paintings more than the rope itself,
So will the shadow fall on a canvas?
I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I don't know, it might just be on the wall. Originally I wanted it free hanging because of that cave in that room, and I like the idea of that being the interior. But then I like the idea of, I started thinking about the kind of shadows it would cast. And originally I thought I'd try to find black rope and that you would actually see it as a 3D line. And I think it's harder to see in this color, that it could kind of get lost. If it was free hanging and it wasn't in front of something white, I think you could lose that line, you know? That's the kind of thing that you kind of have to be in the space to figure out. Make a loop. Kind of a pretzel knot. This is my first drawing when I was trying to figure it out. That's what it came out of.
Oh wow. See?
I don't do very like super strong planning.
And was this was it the balcony?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then in the process it changes and you kind of go, maybe this won't work as well on the balcony, maybe it should do this instead.
Yeah.
This must be 3 feet from the wall.
In the gallery, will you suspend the ropes from the rafters with the fishing wire?
That's what I have to figure out.
Yeah.
I mean, what would be a drag, but I might have to do it, is I don't want it to be perceived to be, for the piece to perceive to start at the ceiling. So
Yeah.
I don't want a rope that goes all the way up to the rafter.
Yeah.
I want it as if we're looking at the building, let's just say. I want there to be a top to it, so, but I want it to hang freely. So I'll probably use the fishing wire kind of stuff. You know, I that's what I have to come up with. Like, is it something that, how can it be suspended?
Try to change my mind.
No, it's not so much that, it's that it's been taking me to kind of weird places and I want your take on it.
Great studio.
Lovely, right?
Yeah. I like mine, so I wish it was warmer.
Yeah. So I went from what I felt was enough realism that you know it's a building.
The overall.
Then overall you kind of know what it is.
Yeah.
And it was too, for my sense, it was like too close to what the structure was.
You hadn't sort of moved it far enough into a
Right, so initially what I did, part of my process of this is starting with Frisket, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, kind of looks like an after image, or
You're talking about the white.
when I first put the Frisket on,
Okay.
which ends up being these areas.
Right.
So I decided to make an image that looked the way it did when it was just the Frisket.
Gotcha.
Right, so
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah,
like, it's kind of like an
yeah.
image and an after image.
Yeah. No, it's a negative positive.
Right, and I started getting into a more, kind of more abstraction and feeling like, the grid alone suggests structure and that might be enough. And then I wanted to try to go small, but I couldn't fathom how to go small with these. So I decided to take a detail, a little segment, and I made some small ones.
Yeah.
Which now, of course, are very abstract.
Yeah. No, basically, to me, they were totally. They're not completely disassociated with the sort of the quantity that's known. Now they're just about that kind of destruction or that kind of power. Or
Right.
That kind of
And so I looked at that and I thought, well, I wonder what happens then when you blow up that detail.
Right.
And so I basically did as close a copy as I could blown up.
Yeah. But then that changes the whole gesture. It's like there's a weight above and nothing below, so what's holding it up? Is this gonna continue, could this actually avalanche down on me? So therefore.
Which gets me to why I'm using charcoal.
Yeah, but that's just it. There's a weight and a ephemeralness about it at the same time.
Yeah.
That's why, but the same thing is, all of a sudden this space is not open and airy. You know, in a sense, it's kind of compacted by the weight above it.
Right.
So it's a really dense space.
Yeah.
And the verticality of the falling of that.
Yeah.
I think that's my, I mean, then all of a sudden you kind of segue into this kind of structure.
So this is coming from realizing that I don't care about the particular image. It's really, it's a line drawing. Like that's a line drawing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make a three-dimensional line drawing. You know, like what happens now if I take it and add a kind of dimensionality with medium, but simplify it to just that line drawing. And initially my idea was to hang it away from the wall so that you have the shadow.
Yeah. That's great.
So I decided to photograph the rope because I just don't know what I'm doing with it yet. And I did that, and I thought, what the hell do I do with this?
I would have that same reaction.
Yeah. Come on. What would you do with this?
Well, back in the day when I was doing these kind of things, I used to dip ropes into Roplex.
See, I was thinking about latex. What's Roplex?
Roplex is Roman Haas, polyurethane. You know, it's acrylic emulsion.
I'm thinking about.
It's what I used to make those paintings out of in the 70s.
Okay, so I've been thinking of dipping it myself.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking of dipping it in something that is opaque.
Yeah.
Like a rubber.
Yeah. Don't do latex.
Why?
Oh, it's just so funky and it rot. You know, look at Eva Hess. You're gonna.
Because what I'm thinking is that then you'd get all the drippies.
Oh, no question. No question. I mean, no, you could make this thing, but then it looks like it's, you know, it looks like a climbing rope ladder that's been on the side of a boat and now it's got seaweed on it.
I don't care.
No, I'm just.
I mean, I don't care because in context that isn't what it looks like. You know what I mean?
But
at this point, I can only think about context.
Are you trying to build up the kind of surfaces that are on the paintings on the rope?
Not to that degree, but I'd like to see.
You want to change this surface.
And yes, initially I thought I'd be able to just wear this down and tray it and get a more warm quality to it.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's.
Well, that's a really tough size.
It's a very tough size. It won't do it.
Wear that out. You've got to.
And then I thought, well, I'm not attached to it being rope at all. I could dip it in something that will have. I mean, maybe even it's just in paint that's been made thick. Part of what's been driving this for me is that our experience of all these big events is now 24/7 on the news. And it's all documentary footage that has been obviously framed and edited. Yeah. And so we're getting, you know, somebody's idea of what that was, but because it's photography, we're taking it as a kind of authentic representation.
It becomes a nature film or something for me sometimes. It's just like, oh, look at that. And there's, I mean,
well,
the sense
that,
of...
and also I think it makes us feel as if we have had some kind of, it's a little bit like feeling good about yourself because you watched a TED Talk about world hunger.
Yeah.
It's like, it's as if you're an activist because you've been a participant in watching activists speak or something. And there's a little bit of that, I think, with looking at these images. You've been horrified by them and therefore you're part of the solution. You know, there's something that I think is really problematic about how we're getting our information right now.
Well, also for me, it allows you to distance from it without. And it's kind of like sitting in your, like during the LA riots, one of them. You know, you're sitting watching the burning things on the TV, and all of a sudden there's ashes falling on your front lawn. It's like, but you rely on the TV more than you rely. You want to deal with what's really going on. It sort of makes it so it's rescaled, so it's more digestible.
That's very interesting. During the LA riots, I was at work my job site was taken over by the National Guard. The National Guard's tanks suddenly rolled in, and they're like, everybody go home. And
Where were you working?
I was at Fox Studios, and you drive
Well,
off
I
the
can
lot.
understand that might be a destination point for destruction, yeah.
It wasn't. It was not. It was the other part of town. You leave the lot and you're in gridlock because the city's,
Yeah.
in having a heart attack, and there was so much chaos, and it's really interesting that when you finally get home, you run to the TV.
Yeah.
I often think, isn't everybody making work about this? Like, how
Yeah.
did you make work about anything else?
Yeah.
We're so
No.
bombarded with
Information that's
information that is of
Can
a
be-
traumatic nature.
But that it can be turned into some kind of visual lesson to me. I'm just trying to make it so there's some kind of parable that comes out of it.
That's the part that I think I stay away from, because what lesson would there be? I mean, I know for myself, it's a suspicion of it all. It's a kind of suspicion about how we're processing this information. But I don't know that I have any kind of the way I justify even being an artist at all
Yeah.
is that I understand that historically that art is art becomes artifact. It becomes something that tells you something about the time in which it was made,
Right.
and that becomes part of our understanding of history, and therefore in toto it is of value to us, because I don't ask that of a particular artwork. And it'd be too much responsibility for me to take that on. I think I'm just part of a tradition, and I'm.
But I'm going to say that. It seems like, you see your work as autobiographical at all? Autobiographical, and these are things that are important to me, therefore that's why I paint them. Or are they outside of your life, and basically your art's one thing and your life's another thing?
No, this is who I am. I mean, the thread that runs through my work is my hypersensitivity to my world, like my anxiety around it.
Right.
And so that's what I draw on, because that's my reality. I
Right.
wouldn't know how to separate that from, you pursue what gets your attention.
No,
You pursue what you're interested in.
No, but that's the same.
I mean, I really truly believe, I was telling Kit this, I don't think art lies. I think art tells you something about the artist. And whether they know it or not, and whether they're trying to do that or not, ultimately, your work is going to say a lot about who you are.
Yes.
I think. I don't think it's going to give a false impression of who you are.
When did you start working on that particular image?
When did I start?
Yeah.
A year ago.
Yeah. Wow.
I started a year ago, actually. Yeah. Okay, I'll say this part, but then you cut it out if it goes into like weirdness. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I've just been merrily going my way, working on these images that I found interesting, and often I do more than one. That's one of the great things about addressing problems with painting, is you try it one way and then you try it another way, and you can keep working into the same painting, or you can say, well, that's interesting, what if I tried it this way? So it's not uncommon for me to make numerous paintings from one image. So that's what happened when I did this, and the first image I made was pretty close enough to the building to be recognizable, that image. And I remember thinking that it was too tight. It was kind of too tightly rendered. What if I pushed it, further away from that? And my paintings had started getting more and more, the mark making was more and more abstract. And so I was just interested in seeing how far I could push it there without losing, completely losing image. And that I'm still there, basically a year later. Only in retrospect, did I realize that my husband got really ill a year ago, like gravely ill. And I think, you know, when somebody's close to you is sick, your world gets very small and very focused. And I think I brought that focus, that tunnel vision into the studio. And I think, without even realizing it, I was setting like very manageable parameters. You know, that I didn't have the bandwidth for really broad exploration. And so instead I just started drilling down into this one image and this, you know, this singular area. And I found it personally really interesting. You know, that you can do the same thing over and over and over and over again and still feel like you're learning.